joining me for this edition of the Daily Intelligence Briefing for September 23rd, 2021. This is the video series that we hope will keep to 10 minutes or less, giving you the latest headlines from Protestia.com in Christian polemics news and from other trusted discernment sources online. We have some good headlines for you. Well, some good headlines, some iffy ones, some that hopefully will make you think, and one specifically that I think will be a great blessing to you. But before we get to those, the greatest blessing, which of course is the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is the good news that God the Father sent his one and only begotten Son Jesus to the world to die on the cross in place of sinners like you and me. Of course, our sin rightly incurring the wrath and punishment of the Almighty God and separating us forever from him in eternal punishment, if not for the saving work of Jesus Christ, who stepped into our place and paid the price that our sin deserved to God the Father, securing our salvation. Jesus died and on the third day was raised from the dead, conquering death, now sits at the right hand of God the Father and intercedes on our behalf. If you would like to know more about Jesus, you have more questions about the wonderful news of the gospel, or would just like us to pray for you, please reach out on any of our social media channels, and we would be more than blessed to be able to do that. Now on to the headlines. This from Protestia.com headline: John MacArthur publishes COVID-19 Without Fear Manifesto. This is actually an article at Protestia that links and talks about and links to I believe it's a 5,000 word kind of history of what went down the past couple of years with COVID issues with their church and just with the country and the world in general. I would recommend you read it. I think it is a very informative and well-written and well-researched accounting of what went down. There is a link at Protestia.com in this article to get to that. The statement is called Facing COVID-19 Without Fear. And they're explaining that on account of receiving so many messages from church leaders on how to deal with COVID-19 lockdown orders or other government-mandated restrictions on worship, they have created this, quote, record of how our church responded to the government's efforts to keep our congregation from gathering, an index of some things we have learned, and a few important biblical principles to bear in mind as you consider how you and your church must respond biblically. So this is at Protestia, and I would say it is well worth a read. Our next headline, this coming from Protestia: Apologist William Craig denies Genesis 1-11 and claims that Adam was a caveman that lived 750,000 years ago. So, frequently viewed as evangelicalism's foremost Christian apologist, William Lane Craig's name is most often associated with his ministry organization, Reasonable Faith, which is also the name of his most popular book and his weekly podcast. Craig is a proponent of so-called mere Christianity theology, and he professional philosopher who frequently seeks to advocate for quote-unquote bare theism. He's a member of this, and this is very odd. You should find this odd if you know something about Christian soteriology. Craig is a member of and a Sunday school teacher at a Southern Baptist church, and yet he is Wesleyan in terms of soteriology, which of course is on the far side of Arminianism. He is also a Molinist and a social Trinitarian, has proposed a controversial Neo-Apollinarian Christology. Although Craig rejects open theism, he has stated that God must play the cards he has been dealt. Now, for those of you that don't know, open theism is basically the idea that God doesn't know what's going to happen. He acts in the world. He does intercede. He is holy and righteous, but he's not all powerful and sovereign in the way that true Christians understand him to be powerful and sovereign. I've always likened it to winding up the earth and sort of letting it go And then every once in a while, God will kind of, push it to the side or intervene a little bit to keep things on track. But he really doesn't know what's going to happen to you. He doesn't know who's going to accept salvation. That's a pretty rudimentary explanation of open theism. But we can talk about that later, I'm sure, on a podcast if anybody has more questions about it. But this article is at Protestia, and safe to say that we would recommend that you stay clear of William Lane Craig, as he is not a literal interpreter of the Bible. And in this article, it talks about how he refers to the Genesis account as what he calls mytho-history. It's myth, and of course we true Christians disagree with that and understand that God actually created the earth in 6 days. It may sound radical, but that's what we believe, and it's absolutely true. Our next headline, this coming from, I have this on MSN. This is NBC News headline: Florida lawmaker files Texas-style abortion bill. Florida state rep filed a bill Wednesday similar to one recently passed in Texas that would ban abortions as early as 6 weeks before many women even know they are pregnant. Of course, you can hear the tact of NBC News on this as they sort of give a little backhanded slap to the Texas bill, the Texas law now, and then of course a backhanded slap here to this new bill filed in Florida, very similar bill by Webster Barnaby, who is a Republican, of course, and the bill would fine physicians at least $10,000 for each abortion performed. It would also allow people to sue anyone who helps end a pregnancy in violation of the law. Yet this sounds very similar to the Texas bill. I would be personally in support of such a thing, even though I'm an abortion abolitionist. This is certainly a step in the right direction. Again, certainly anything that can get us closer to murdering fewer babies is a good thing, and hopefully can push us over the edge of making it illegal entirely to murder your children. Our next headline, this coming from back to Protestia, and I would argue the biggest headline for this video here, recently finished and written headline at Protestia: Religious exemption for mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations, a printable PDF, and a plea for pastors to sign a petition. Headline here saying, or the image saying, God has not given government control over his temple. Your body is his temple. Dozens of ordained clergy and theologians have worked together to produce an airtight religious exemption to mandatory vaccinations. This brought to you at Protestia. Our good friend and fearless leader, Jordan Hall, putting this together, and with assistance from others. And there's kind of two components to this that I want to make you aware of. And we'll probably actually discuss this a little bit more on the next podcast, on the next polemics report. But just a quick little, since this is on Protestia, a quick little overview for you to see this today. There's basically two components. There is the PDF you can download and print. That PDF is designed to be taken to an ordained clergy member. Take it to your pastor, as an example, and if he is in agreement with it, certainly have him sign it and present it to an employer as a religious exemption against taking COVID-19, a COVID-19 forced vaccination. There is also, and I don't know if the link is in here or not yet, there's a link in here to a petition, a change.org petition for clergy members, pastors, chaplains, to indicate their agreement that all those who claim a religious exemption, as here described, are under God rightly entitled to that exemption. And we'd say every shepherd that signs will give credibility to 100 sheep behind them. Now, there is one point to make here at Protestia. We don't believe anybody needs a written religious exemption to claim a religious exemption. Your religion is something that you carry with you. It's not something that somebody else has to sign off on. It's something that should affect every part of your life. And the fact that you claim an exemption should mean that you have an exemption under our understanding of the rule of law, and certainly our understanding of our biblical beliefs as Christians and as they apply to civil governance. So, but there, the petition is here. You can see it as it's embedded as a PDF, and there's a link right down here to download it as well. I believe the download or the exemption link will do the same thing. Within the exemption, basically within this exemption form, are some instructions, and one of those things that it says specifically is that it says, in order to use this religious exemption, we ask that you sincerely hold to its biblical attributes and do so with genuine intentions. It is not designed for the irreligious. It has intentionally been kept short and easy to read for the layman, like myself, presuming that employers with little religious training may place themselves into the position of judge to read it and determine its veracity. It has therefore been kept on an elementary level for their benefit rather than that of those using the religious exemption. So it's intended to be read by an employer and understood. And of course, as I previously alluded to, ultimately we believe that the only thing one must really do to use their religious exemption is to say that they have one. Claiming a constitutional right, much like one might do with the Fifth Amendment, is enough to use it. Shame on every secular workplace. Let me repeat, shame on you for thinking that the deeply held religious conviction of another person is for you to verify. Many helped on this religious exemption. Citations will be made where appropriate. So head over to protestia.com. You'll see a graphic, a picture that kind of looks like this. Click on that article to read and download and utilize this religious exemption form, which we believe to be theologically airtight and solid, and certainly dovetailed very, very well with our civil laws, the Constitution, the supreme law of the land here in the United States, and directly applicable to the current situation that a lot of people are facing with their employers. Thank you very much for tuning into this edition of the Daily Intelligence Briefing. We hope you will check out protestia.com and subscribe to this YouTube channel and ring that notification bell to get updated of when all of our videos are posted. We will see you next time.